Good evening, and thank you for being here with us at Programmers Week. I'm Radu Susanu, and in the following hour, I am prepared to roll up my sleeves as we have some refurbishing to do. With me on stage, we have a multiple table tennis champion that has a passion for renovating web applications. Let's give Norbert Layis a warm welcome. Norbert, I'll let you kick this one off.
Thank you, Radu. I'll take over from here. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully, you can see it pretty well. First of all, hello and welcome to Refurbishing Your Legacy Pages the Hard Way. My name is Layis Norbert, and I'm going to be your host for this presentation. I'll start with the introduction, but first a few words about me, apart from what Radu just mentioned. I've been part of the Softvision family for approximately 3.5 years. As most of us, I'm a coffee addict because, well, we all know that JavaScript compiles faster and better while being on caffeine. I practice a lot of sports, among which table tennis, regular tennis, and also I'm a gym addict. Just a few things about me. And in the last couple of years, I worked on an accounting application, and this is where my journey actually, and for now, our journey begins, because this is where I did all the things that I'm going to talk to you about in this presentation. And now, moving to the actual presentation, as you can see, these are a few things that I want to get through in this presentation. We're going to discuss mainly what refurbishing means in a general sense and what it meant for me, what it implies, different pros and cons to take into consideration for this entire endeavor, how we've worked and developed our process to be able to deliver more productively, more efficiently, and deliver more quality code, some lessons that I've learned, and also the Q&A section, with which I'm pretty sure you're used to if you attended any Programmers Week meeting before. I'll jumpstart with the first part of this presentation, why refurbishing might be good for your app. Well, if you remember, I just mentioned a couple of times, and even Radu mentioned the word refurbishing, but we don't yet know what it actually means. Well, in a general sense, it might mean a total rewrite of the code, or it might mean a partial rewrite of the code. But for me, it was just upgrading the styles of an entire application. And while doing that, we had to also add some accessibility features. Don't worry if you don't know that much about accessibility. It was new for me when I started with this endeavor, but I'm going to explain about that a bit later. The issue from which we started was, well, we had a bunch of legacy pages built upon deprecated old technologies, and what we wanted to do here is to provide the new look and feel of the application. And now we're diving into our actual journey. And now coming back to why refurbishing might be good for your application. Well, as I mentioned, it will improve the user interaction. It will give another glow to your application, and it will make, well, the way you access and see the content more interactive for you. Also, this will improve the user retention and will grow the user base. What this means is that the user is going to spend more and more time on your application, and you're going to attract more and more people to use your application, which we all know that is highly beneficial for you. And well, a third reason this is pretty easy to infer is the fact that the client demands it. And if we look at all these three notes here, we can see that they all go hand in hand. In fact, in the meaning that well, everything will probably start from the fact that the client will demand it, and these will be the reasons why you will do or start such an endeavor. Okay, here comes another discussion. If you recall that I mentioned refurbishing, what it meant, at least for me, a upgrade of the entire styling of an application, as opposed to rewriting the code. This is actually based on, well, lots of negotiations in the first place, why you should do one of them and not the other. So refurbishing might be a bit actually more It won't take that much time to do it because you're already going to build upon what you have, even though it might take much more effort from a technical perspective. Rewriting will probably be way more time consuming because you're going to rewrite some from scratch, whole features, whole implementations, and so on. What refurbishing means, or what it implies, actually. Well, I mentioned before that it's actually a cocktail of deprecated old technologies. There's a high probability that if you come across such, or you're going to start such an endeavor, you're going to be in the same situation where you're going to have lots of old technologies which communicate between themselves, and you might not necessarily have that much background about those technologies, because they might even be, I don't know, back-end technologies, or technologies you haven't heard before. But everything you do should be done on a balance between the cost and outcome. In other sense, it will probably be a roller coaster. Having these technologies in mind, you probably are not aware of too many information about them. So you're going to spend some time, you're going to get out of your comfort zone to research these technologies and see how your application is built on them. And yes, it has the potential of being painful, but I guarantee that it will be totally worth it. Moving on to how to or not to start the refurbishing process. Well, in this case, as in any cases, when you start an endeavor, it's a really good idea to start with a plan, even though it's going to be a basic plan. You're going to build upon that. Your process is going to evolve. It's going to become better. So you shouldn't be really concerned with how your initial plan looks like. You just should have a plan and then contribute and adjust that as required. After that, what you should do is to make sure that you propagate all the information required to your teammates in order for them to understand how to do things, what things to do, and why. This is crucial before starting such process to make sure there's enough clarity for the entire team. And as I said, your process is going to evolve as you go through iterations of delivering code. You're going to make certain modifications to it. You're going to add some new, maybe, I don't know, agile rituals or anything else, but this will have improved the deliverables and the quality of the code you deliver. And in the opposite, how not to start the refurbishing process? Well, in this case, you're going to have a flexible mindset. Having a fixed mindset here won't be really helpful, as you're going to find yourself in different situations where when you're going to have to change your priorities. As I've already mentioned, the fact that you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone and learn new things, maybe refresh some technical skills, and spend some time on researching how some issues should be fixed to be performant in your case. Another note here would be not preparing the ground for shared code. This is really crucial. You know that even in case of big applications, of really big applications, which consist of a bunch of pages, you're going to have lots of components which are shared across your application. And this is crucial for you and your team to make sure you have prepared the ground for shared code, as you could even prepare separate bundles to tackle different, actually to tackle all the components in your application in an instant, as opposed to, I don't know, making per page upgrades, which would be really time consuming. As a third note here, not having a solid rule set for ease of writing code. This is not required only for this endeavor. This is a nice to have for each and any other application you start working on, because this promotes consistency, and with this you can make sure that your developers won't have, each one of them won't have an individual way of doing things. Moving on to what you might face in the process. Obviously, I haven't yet said too many nice things about this endeavor, but we still have some time. In the moment where we have some hard bits, we're going to have a discussion about custom code versus shared code. My recommendation here would be that you should always count on shared code and try to fix when you have shared components, you should try to address them in a, let's say, global bundle. So that's enabling sharing code as opposed to using custom code. Custom code should only be used in the case it can be done anyhow else. So as a last alternative. I've already mentioned the outdated technologies. That's going to be a bit difficult, and considering all of these, you're going to also have deadlines which aren't really going to be that helpful for your sanity, but it's going to turn well, I can promise you that. Now the going global versus per page upgrade. As I said, always go global. Small page adjustments are only for the cases you can't satisfy the request by going global. So small page adjustments only when you can't do it anyhow else. Going global, as we all know, it promotes reusability and having a general rule set there. And well, initially, you're going to probably have a big bundle, which will have lots of code. But again, you're going to have a general rule set. So that will help to promote consistency. And if you think a little bit more about this, you can even break down that big bundle into smaller bundles, because that will help to improve the performance of your page. Just imagine that you have, or you won't go into breaking it into smaller bundles. Just imagine having a really big bundle with tons of lines of code, and importing that on each page will be really impactful, as opposed to having, let's say, one bundle per component and importing that bundle only where it is required. If you would run some performance tests, you would see that the later part, the one in which you optimize into smaller bundles, would be more effective in this case. And as mentioned, for the per page approach, it should be used only for custom components or custom behaviors. It's going to be more time consuming, since you couldn't do this in using the global approach. And obviously, since we talk about individual adjustments, it's going to discourage the reuse of code. Oh, it's 0.5 pixel long. What do I mean by that? Well, here I have a saying: strive for perfection, but settle for excellence. So what I mean here is the fact that, having said all these things, that is going to be time consuming, you're going to get out of your comfort zone, you're going to spend some time on researching things. Even that, let's say you have a component which design is off by 0.5 pixels. Even addressing that might seem really, or might actually be really time consuming. And you have also to consider the deadlines. And in my case, and in my opinion, you should settle for what it is good enough, not perfect, because you might waste too much time, and you have to even check the gains of doing that. So if you're going to address, let's say, an issue that with the component being 0 pixels off, that's not going to have a big impact on your application, instead of focusing on things that actually matter. Next up, we have figuring out the process. I've mentioned that is going to involve lots of repetitive work. You're going to come across different issues on different components. They're going, the solution, you're going to actually reuse it on multiple instances. So it might be a good idea to keep track of them, because you're not going to reinvent the wheel this way. Here we can lay the grounds for a smooth workflow. Sorry, we talked about a bit about the process. We're going to elaborate a bit later about this. You're going to really have to be agile with respect to your priorities, your deadlines, the fact that you're going to probably spend more time on Stack Overflow than you did initially, but still, you're going to gain very much as a developer from this. Moving on to developing a solid process. Words of advice here: the process will change almost entirely. So you shouldn't really be afraid if you start with the basic processes I mentioned, and during, I don't know, let's say 5 or 6 iterations, or I don't know, 2 or 3 releases, your process will be changed entirely, and it won't resemble at all the initial, let's say, juvenile process where you didn't know what you're starting with, you didn't have the bigger picture in mind, but now it grew up, it became more mature, and it helps you to deliver more effectively and increase your productivity. Also here, don't be afraid to speak up. There might be some cases, I don't know, instances where certain rituals or parts of your process are making you less productive. And this would be a very good moment to speak up and try to make certain adjustments inside your team, whether you can improve this and make and increase your productivity. Moving to accessibility and why you have to care. This is already the second part of this presentation. I'm sure that some of you are not aware with this, but it's getting traction. And this is one of the things that I had to do on the application I was working on. So what is accessibility? Accessibility actually tries to tackle, tries to make your page, well, in a sense, more accessible. What does that mean? It means that it enables people with cognitive disabilities to access and navigate the application. This is done by having in mind a standard called WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. At a high level overview, it provides all the information required for you in order to make certain adjustments to your page, no matter if it refers to doing some changes with, I don't know, HTML or JavaScript, just to make sure that everybody can access the application. In this sense, there are a few auditing tools to estimate where your page or your application stands from an accessibility point of view. And for the auditing tools, we have NVDA, X, Chrome, Lighthouse, and so on. As far as I know, Chrome Lighthouse is the most popular, and the fact that is also score-based helps a lot to have a better image of how your page stands. Accessibility, as I said, is getting traction. It's not really implemented in all the countries in the world, but it is in a few. And what I found interesting to mention is the amendment to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 from US, which stipulates the fact that federal agencies should make information, their content available to people with cognitive disabilities. Now we move on to an example of Lighthouse audit. So this is how an audit done with Chrome Lighthouse would look like. As you can see in the screen, we have a number 82, which shows us where our page stands. 0 would mean that your page has not, your application has nothing to do with accessibility, and you should really work to improve that. And 100% means that it is totally ready to be used by people with cognitive disabilities. And down below, we can see some of the issues highlighted by the audit. The fact that there are some contrast issues, so some colors will have to be changed. We have some issues with the names and labels for the, I don't know, different inputs, dropdowns, or other components used in the application, and other issues with the tables and lists. All this can be fixed by checking out the WCAG guide, which shows you how and what should be done. Another example here would be the accessibility insights tool. As you can see, it's not really score-based, but it also provides a nice visual illustration of the issues on the page. As you can see, there are 330 issues, so I'm pretty sure that somebody will have to spend a lot of time to fix all those, but there's that. Moving on to how to approach accessibility issues and what to expect. Well, if you remember what I said a couple of minutes ago, it's going to be stressful, it's going to be hard. So I suggest trying this with calm and ease of mind. I said it, but I'm pretty sure that some psychiatrist said this at some point in time. I can't tell you exactly, but you will have to take me for granted. And if calm doesn't work, well, solutions will be repetitive, so we might as well want to keep track of them in order to not reinvent the wheel. Don't be afraid to take time, even if it means lots of time, to understand what accessibility does and how you can use accessibility in your favor to solve a pretty big amount of issues. And well, didn't want to forget this one, but it might be different with different tech stacks. Sorry, it might be a bit more difficult with different tech stacks in the sense that they weren't built having accessibility in mind. So you'll have to be careful about this one too. One thing that really helped me while tackling accessibility issues was to ask myself the proper questions. And why is that? Well, I was in a situation where, well, I was fixing accessibility issues, constantly fixing accessibility issues, but all my tickets got pushed back. Why? Well, because I wasn't seeing the bigger picture, in the sense that, okay, I was solving the issue, but some information from there was either redundant or I actually overburdened the cognitive disabled person with extra information which he actually did not require. And what I did in this sense, I started asking myself the proper questions, and I've solved these kind of issues. So some questions which I found relevant and personally used in the application I was working on. Is the current solution enough for the cognitive impaired audience? And am I able to navigate with ease through the application? If you come across such an endeavor and you have to work on it, if you ask yourself at least one of these questions, I can assure you that everything's gonna be fine and your tickets won't get pushed back like mine were actually. But that was only in the beginning. Then I perfected, delivered everything required, and then I came to talk in this presentation. One other thing that I've learned here, pushback is your friend, the client too, but he might not always be right. What I mean here is that you're going to have different negotiations with your client or manager and so on about what should be done and what not, in the sense that, as I mentioned with that saying about excellence versus perfection, thing is that once again, you care a lot about the impact of fixing something, because else you might just waste time, and you want to deliver the best of the application as soon as you can. So yeah, this is going to be always a negotiation. Okay, do we want to do this? Why do we want to do this? How does this help us? What does it improve? And so on. Next up, we have it's going to be painful and what I've learned section. This is already pretty intuitive. I mentioned a couple of times that it's going to be painful, but it will turn the best developer out of you after going through such an endeavor. The path of, I have a saying here, the path of least resistance will never make you proud. Well, once again, you're constantly going out of your comfort zone. You might feel annoyed at times. I don't know, it might question even some of your technical skills, but that is in the beginning because your body feels some resistance. You might not actually like in the beginning the fact that you don't know too much about the subject. It's like, okay, well, assuming you work with JavaScript, well, that came incrementally and you learn JavaScript and you develop on that. But this one, you're going to develop it in a much faster time frame and adjust to it. That's what I'm talking about here. Moving on to the what I've learned section, some keynotes here. As I said, it's really empowering the fact that I can make some changes to the application and will help people with different disabilities properly access and navigate through the application. It also leaves room for innovation in the sense that you might add some new features, or you might improve the performance of the whole application on the fly if the time allows it. Process flexibility is in your hands. This I find really powerful because you can actively contribute and thus developing probably some negotiation skills, and you're going to gain more insights and business logic regarding your application. I'm not going to mention already, it's pretty obvious becoming a better developer by doing this. I already mentioned also that I learned how to push back properly, and I learned how to set proper client expectations. Now we're going to get to the Q&A section, but before letting Radu ask your questions, if any, actually read me out your questions, if any. I'll nicely ask you if you could scan this QR code and give me some feedback regarding this whole presentation. I would really much appreciate it. Now I'll leave this slide as is, and I'll ask Radu to read the questions.
Hey Norby, we have one question from the audience. First of all, great presentation. Thank you for delivering it. Let's dive right into the question. So what are the minimum requirements to pass an accessibility test? Considering the workload, to reach a score of 100 in Lighthouse, do you recommend going for a score of 100 or going for the minimum?
Actually, well, minimum obviously won't satisfy, because 0 means actually that your page has nothing to do with accessibility. You might, once again, you're going to probably negotiate this, the fact that, okay, different auditing tools will identify a bunch of issues which are going to be categorized as being critical, serious, medium, or really small issues. So what I suggest in this case is that you should at least solve all critical and serious issues, and for the other ones which are, let's say, of lower priority, that should be decided upon negotiation between your, I don't know, your client, your manager, your team. Yes. But actually, I appreciate this question. It was a really nice question.
Cool. One other question would be, what was the hardest thing to understand in this endeavor?
In this case, I already mentioned what was the hardest thing here. The fact that I had to learn how to ask myself the proper questions. I wasn't getting it in the beginning, why my tickets got pushed back. And okay, I was fixing the issue, but I was lacking the bigger picture in which you don't just solve an issue, you make sure that it properly integrates in your application, and it doesn't, well, overburden the user. That was the hardest thing I learned during this endeavor.
Okay, another one, it's, are there any tools to test UI accessibility in a DevOps pipeline?
That's not really something I'm aware of. I could research that if you're going to give me the name of the one that has these questions, and I can reach back with an answer. I'm a front-end developer. I worked only with that. You've seen in the presentation certain auditing tools, at least for the front-end side. That would be MBDA, Lighthouse, X, and so on. But I couldn't tell you this from the top of my head.
Okay. So you mentioned that you need a process, right? That will change almost entirely. But what happens, for example, if you start with a bad plan that basically impacts your team's productivity?
Well, in this case, what I could say, you can't start with a bad plan. It would be bad to start without a plan, but you can't really start with a bad plan in the sense that, well, it's not your first endeavor probably as a programmer. It's not your first job. So probably you have some insight of how things should move on, or how things should be done in your process. And in this sense, any plan will do, because as I said, you're going to adjust that on the process iteratively as, I don't know, releases pass by and so on. You're going to adjust that. And so mainly to answer the question, every plan will do, because there's just anytime you can adjust it, make certain modifications to it to satisfy the needs on your project and improve the productivity.
Okay, really cool. Thank you, Norbert, for this presentation once again. Thank you guys for watching. Here we are right before the curtain falls for this day. Thank you for being with us on this wonderful edition of Programmers Week. And I wanted to wish you a good day. Oh, wait, what? Okay, really? Oh, okay. Dear audience, it seems that we have one more thing. In the following hour, a titan of the industry and our dear colleague, Sean Walker, will share his insights on WebAssembly, so stay tuned. That's all from me. Have a great one and a great evening.
Have a nice day, and thank you for attending my presentation.